because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we want to suck your blood. That's my accent. Did you like it, Laura? All right, there it is.
That.
It's Robert Eggers Nosferatu.
Come to me. Come to me. I've never shared my secret with any soul.
You've had these spells since childhood. Tell me what you can from the beginning.
It is like a dream. It was our wedding. When we turned around, everyone was dead. The stench of their bodies was horrible. Standing before me was death. But I'd never been so happy.
And welcoming back to the show, we have Phil Iscove. Phil is the host of Podcasts Like It's. That's a podcast all about various decades in films. He's also the creator of the TV show Sleepy Hollow. You heard him here last discussing Steven Soderbergh's Solaris, and now we have him back for another remake. Welcome to the show, Phil.
I didn't realize that it was a remake as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I mean,
Yes,
I did
we're
realize
double
it was
remaking.
a remake, but you know what I mean.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought about that when I was producing the intro. I was like, oh yeah, we're doing only remakes with Phil. I think that should be our tradition.
could be a
Sure.
Yeah, I
I'm,
like
I'm
that.
game to do that. Yeah. Why not?
Emily's always Christmas. Phil always
I know
remakes.
she's dug herself that hole.
I mean, she loves that hole. That's her favorite place to
Yeah.
be.
I know, but every time we talk to her, we're like, why are we here to talk about, Fred
Christmas.
Claus?
Yeah,
And
sure.
she's just like,
Oh, Fred Claus. Yeah.
Lovely,
There you
lovely
go.
Fred Claus. Okay, so Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, that's the film of the day. It's a grim and grounded take on the classic vampire story. It's steeped in lore and a reimagined dead language. It has many of Eggers' signature flourishes, including an emphasis on period details, exploration of madness and the occult, and very big swing performances. Today we'll dig into the film, asking the big questions such as, what's it all about? Is it any good? Did we need another Nosferatu? Phil, I'll start with you. What was your initial reaction to the film?
I have to be perfectly honest. I'm not like the biggest Robert Eggers fan. I like his stuff. I certainly don't dislike his work. It can feel like an exercise, a filmmaking exercise, and a little sort of emotionally hollow sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into this sort of a little bit trepidatious to some degree. I was excited, but yeah, I mean, I liked The Witch. I really want to like The Northman, and the more I think about The Northman, I'm like, maybe I liked it, and maybe I should give it another watch. Because the performances are really great, and it's got my girl Bjork in it. So I mean, it's hard for me not to love it on some level. But yeah, it's just sort of, so I went into this unsure of like what it was going to ultimately be or feel like. And my first sort of initial reaction to it was being blown away by the production. It's a really, really beautiful looking movie, like just gothically gorgeous. But I know the story really well.
Right.
So
Mhm.
I did find my mind wandering at times when I was just like, are we going to do anything new with this
Yeah.
story?
Yeah.
Or are we
Mhm.
just going to do it again? And
Yep.
spoiler, we're just gonna do it again.
Yep. Yep.
But it's a good story. I don't mean to take anything away from Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's real good. I mean, it obviously
Yeah.
holds up. So I guess my sort of, this is a long-winded answer to your question, but I think that what stayed with me is some of the performances are most of the performances I think are phenomenal. Like I think everybody's really great in it, but it made me just want to watch Coppola's 1992 film Bram Stoker's.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You just said the magic words.
Yeah.
Phil.
Yeah. I know. I was like, this episode might turn into like when we talk about the modern day Dunes, the Villeneuve Dunes, where we're like, but have you guys seen the one that Lynch
The
made?
1984. Oh my God. I totally am with you. I kept thinking about Bram Stoker's Dracula, the
It's hard
Coppola
not
film,
to.
and I was just, this is good. Well, I read some interviews with Eggers, and so this is a film, the 1922, the Marnell film, is a film that's very important to him. So he describes this story of, I think he was in high school or maybe even younger, watching it on a kind of broken down VHS tape, alone in his room and kind of having this transcendent, mystical, occult-like experience and being really enamored with it. Apparently he staged a production of it in high school where he painted everyone black and white.
That tracks.
Yeah,
I know.
Exactly.
I love to know that he's always been himself.
Yes. And
let your freak flag fly, Robert Eggers.
Exactly, Robert Eggers. Yes. And I think as you said, like as an exercise, in terms of trying, I think, to recreate the feeling that he had for maybe another generation of the kind of oddness and mystical nature of this film that it did for what it produced in him. I think it's successful. I think he captures a lot of the vibe of the original, and I think weirdly enough, the original, and by the original I mean Nosferatu, the 1922. Of course, there have been many since then, but it's a film that is crying out for a sound remake. Like we were watching it last night, and there's so many title cards, intertitles, like, oh, and then all this plot, and you're like, yeah, they needed sound to do this, right? And so I think like it's almost as soon as it's made, it's like people are like, all right, I could do that. And I think Eggers, is similarly positioned, and so anyway, I think that's kind of where he's coming from, and I can appreciate that. I think this was a bit of this is like his white whale in some ways, his North Star. But anyway, Laura, what did you think of the film?
I liked it. I had at every beat the comparison in my head of Francis Ford Coppola's, just because we've seen it a lot of times. We've talked about it on this podcast. We loved it. I do wish that it's definitely not, I understand Eggers is going for something different. I wish that some of the characters went bigger, stranger, sillier. Like specifically Willem Dafoe. I had the Anthony Hopkins performance in my head. And I read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that character is kind of goofy. Like he's a real he's a real oddball. And I guess they try to get at that with, him having all those cats and smoking his like enormous 3-foot pipe all the time. But I'm like, we know Willem Dafoe can get really silly. Like, why don't we? Yeah. Also just bummed that Orlok doesn't get sexy. I kept wondering when he shows up in Germany, I was like, is this when he goes from gross to sexy? But no.
Well, can we talk about the fact that he looks far too much like Jim Carrey from the Sonic movies? Like I really do feel like that's a problem. Like he's never
the
scary.
Mustache specifically.
The coat, the mustache, this giant big bushy mustache, which again looks a lot like what the hell is his name? Dr. Robotnik. Dr. Robotnik.
Robotnik. Yeah.
Okay, we have not seen Jim Carrey's performance.
If you Google it, you will find yourself
I've got an image
unable to see it. And the second he showed up, I was just like, I don't find this guy scary. It is interesting because it's so hard not to see Coppola's Dracula, because of the fact that Coppola also used sort of antiquated film technology when making that film as well. So, his adoration for the history of cinema through the prism of the Dracula story, it's just now. again, this is a generational thing too. That movie came out in 1992. It's 2024 or 2025. And I understand that every generation kind of needs its Dracula, it's Nosferatu or what have you. So I do get that. And I try not to be too hard on this film for that reason. But it does feel a little bit, and maybe I don't mean to project too much onto it, but I do feel it feels a little restrained. Like it does feel as though Eggers is sort of like, I can't get too weird with this because I want this thing to hit. Like I want this thing to connect. And maybe that's just, whatever.
Yeah, I think there's two dimensions. I think you're right that he wants this to have some mainstream success, and it has.
It does.
This movie's made $135 million. It's the fourth highest grossing horror film of 2024, and it's still in theaters, so it's going to make more. The other thing, though, is I think Eggers is his whole. If there was one word I would use to describe, or two, I guess it's a phrase that I use to describe Eggers' filmography, it's period accurate. That's like the thing he really likes. He really, really wants it to be grounded in the history, and in this case, grounded in the folk tales, the vampire folk tales that inspired Bram Stoker. He talks about like, I want to go back to the source text and have this be, have everything kind of be like, not necessarily realistic, but like historical in its way, like evoking the history and the sort of the period of the time. I think in the case of Orlok, it is a decision to make him not sexy. It's a decision to make him a rotting corpse and have him be this like not bestial in the primal sense, but bestial in the like, animal. He's just like the way we are when we're all the same in the ground sort of thing. He does say though he thinks that there's a beauty to that. He one of the interviews he gave, he's talked about like the makeup they had on Skarsgård. And he said, he saw it and he was like, there's like, he's got this rotting flesh. He's got maggots on him. Apparently he had one point real maggots on him. Again, totally unnecessary.
Yeah, they don't need to do that.
But anyway, but he then says it's beautiful. He says, I looked at it, the prosthetic designer, I said, it's beautiful. It's a festering corpse with maggots on it, but it's a beautiful interpretation of death and power. So I do think that's kind of interesting that he wants to like connect these two dimensions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see that. And this is a really, as I mentioned, a gothically beautiful movie. It is embracing all of the sort of visual motifs that go along with that genre in an incredibly effective way. Orlok in all of the iterations of Nosferatu has, looked relatively similar, right? He's bald, he's sort of festering, he's got obviously fangs and what have you. We don't get a whole lot of shots of Orlok, you know what I'm saying, in this movie.
Yeah,
that's true.
He is cloaked in mystery for a lot of it, which I think is effective because once you see him, he's not so scary, in my humble opinion. I do think that it's a performance that left me wanting a little bit, and I don't know if that's because I kept thinking about Oldman's Dracula and the various sort of iterations of him in that film, and sort of how he gets to be different things and different versions and what have you. I understand that this is more of, and forgive me, what is Lily Rose Depp's character's name?
Ellen.
Sure.
I know.
Of course.
Don't you just want to call them all Mina and Jonathan?
Yeah,
and like,
exactly.
I know. The first one where she tells him Thomas, I was like, what the what?
I know.
Yeah, it's like Thomas and Mina. And So, but it does feel as though, I mean, it's her story. And which I appreciated. I think that Lily is very, very good in this movie. An actor that up until this point, I can't really say I've been enthralled with. The Idol was unwatchable in my humble opinion. I only watched the pilot and I was just like, it's not her fault. It's not, but it just didn't work for me. But it was originally supposed to be Anya Taylor-Joy, who left the project, I think, to do Furiosa, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
And Harry Styles was supposed to be Thomas. But obviously Nicholas Hoult took that on. I think that who doesn't want Daniel Day-Lewis to be everything in their movies? I think he was supposed to be Count Orlok.
Wow.
Which, sure.
I thought he retired to be a
He
cobbler
did. Well,
or a furniture maker
or just not an actor.
Not an actor. A tailor?
A tailor.
I don't know. I'm just naming professions
Something with his
from the
hands.
Victorian period.
Yeah,
huh?
Yeah. I guess basically what I'm saying is that I think that Lily, that Orlok is more of this manifestation of her desires and her sort of the fact that she's trapped in this sort of corset world where a woman is not allowed to do, and I to some degree, I guess that does correlate to Mina a little bit. I have not actually read the book. You obviously have read the book, Laura, so you can speak.
It's been a minute, but yes, I did.
It's all written in letters, right?
We talked.
It's all letters.
It's letters.
It's epistolary. Yes.
Sure. My apologies. So I remember Mina, obviously in the 92 version, has similar kind of sexual desires that Dracula unlocks for her. But then again, he unlocks it for everyone because it feels like Jonathan's also just like having orgies and stuff like that. So it's
yeah. He's just pure sex.
Yeah, this movie's not like particularly sexy. I mean, I do love the last image, which is pretty rad. Just that overhead shot of him, that fully festering corpse on her naked body is quite an image. I guess I'm just sort of curious as to like what Eggers sees Orlok as a metaphor for.
That's a great question. Yeah, we should definitely talk about that, and of course we should talk more also about Ellen and their relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, which of those do you want to tackle first, Laura? I mean, I feel
gosh.
I mean, because
I'm not sure if I've gotten my head around either, like what Orlok represents. I do like the characterization of Ellen and making it and focusing it on her.
Yeah.
And I love that part where she, she's kind of just pissing everybody off in this movie.
Yes.
And she's not wrong. And she even says that to him. She finally has it out with Aaron Taylor Johnson, and she's just like, "Why don't you like me?" And you're on her side because she's right. There is a demon. And you're also on his side because she's also like a total handful. And if she was in your house, it would be annoying too.
Yeah.
Like she's
not a great house
making
guest.
trouble.
Yeah. She sucks.
She's if you have been somebody who's, if your mental health has suffered at some point, or if you've been going through something or somebody close to you has, both sides of that coin.
Yes.
And how, it can be trying.
Yes.
To be close to somebody who's struggling like that. And it can be trying to be the person who's struggling and needs people. And I liked when the movie spent time in that space. And particularly to put her in the Victorian period where she really has to just, like, as you said, it's a corset time. She's got to like shut up and look beautiful. This is not a time to be making trouble as a woman.
One of the prescriptions for her maladies is put a corset on her.
Put a corset on her.
Yeah.
She's got too much menstrual blood.
Yeah. I do I think that the thing that probably I appreciate the most about this adaptation is the depiction of mental health and how that folds into the patriarchy, for lack of a better way of putting it, in this time of just sort of, women be crazy, quote unquote. Let's just kind of, push them away out of society, what have you. It's like, out of sight, out of mind. And I do think that Ellen's, tenuous grasp on reality prior to Orlok even coming into her life, it does feel like that's a real sort of bearing wall of her character, which I appreciated, which folds into the Emma Corrin character as well to a certain degree, in terms of how when she starts to believe what's going on and how that starts to affect her relationship and her marriage with her husband. Like, I think all of that stuff is really interesting. Not just on a period level, but just in terms of its depiction of femininity and all that. I appreciated that.
Yeah. And I like the line where, he's putting a little point on it there when I'm sorry, it's a different name.
Von Franz.
Von Franz. Sorry. Von Franz
Franz
tells her, in heathen times, you might have been a great priestess of Isis.
Right.
Yet in these strange and modern world, your purpose is of greater worth.
Yeah.
Her purpose then is just self-sacrifice.
Well, look, Phil, you talked about the patriarchy. The movie doesn't make this super explicit, but it's in there. It's in there. To the point where I'm about to say something and I'm not sure like Eggers even intended it, but it's there, I think, which is the film is interested in the progression of science and where science sort of abuts the unknown. And we're at this point in 1838 where you've made quite a bit of scientific progress, but there's still quite a bit to be discovered. We're not in like the contemporary era where it's almost like, conspiracy theories. It's like, no, it's so obviously wrong. At that point, there was room for the occult, but science had made massive progress. And what did that progress amount to for the most part? It amounted to discounting the views of people who went against it, like von Franz, like Ellen, and in particular, women, because women weren't involved in the, in the scientific community. So
in the academy.
The academy. So they would say like, well, I have this pain. And the men are like, well, that's clearly just some women's issue, not real. You're hysterical, and just dismiss it. And so there is this intertwining of both the academy and the progress of science and the patriarchy, and they're growing together. But it also is interesting that Ellen is sort of the first person that believes her. Well, I guess Thomas believes her because Thomas has encountered Orlok. But the person who really believes her is von Franz, is this kind of maniac scholar, renegade scholar who's and even Anna doesn't really believe her until later. So there is this kind of complex gender dynamics where her savior in a way. I mean, they're actually, to be fair, I shouldn't say this. She has no savior because she ultimately just sacrifices herself. I mean, it's her agency that kills Orlok. It's not they hatch this plan to bury him, to kill him in his grave, but he's not there. He's out boning Ellen.
And the way she tells the story too is that she invited in the Count like through her own loneliness.
That's right. It was
nobody
her,
believed her, or they were like disturbed by her and her vision and her ability to know what's in her presence and her ability to know her mom's going to die. And everybody found her kind of repulsive as a response. And so her yearning for connection put this whole thing into motion.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like so much of the film is belief. Having a belief in something. Do people believe you? Like, just a lot of that seems to be baked into it, which I can imagine, as you guys just said, was not great for women back then. I don't think they were believed much in terms of just how they perceive the world. And it is quite a sad story when you really think about it, mostly for the women in this movie. But just in terms of, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than people not believing you when you know in your bones that something is true, and how that would drive you mad. I mean, there is that, one of the standout scenes in the film is when, Ellen is just having a full core meltdown in front of Thomas, and she's like tearing off her clothes, and it's a real kind of like virtuosic moment for Lily's performance in the film, and she really goes there. And I would say that might be the moment for me where I was like, wow, she's got the goods and she can do this. So I but again, like, just that idea of madness and what could drive you mad, I think is, not something that's new for Eggers. I mean, obviously The Lighthouse was that, writ large. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that it's, I don't know. It's a really just tragic, sad movie. I would argue more so than, like, Bram Stoker's Dracula feels epic and heroic and adventurous, and this film does not feel like that. And that's not a knock against it.
I think.
Yeah, no. Well, the sadness in that movie is about Dracula and not about Mina. And the sadness here is about Ellen. So it is centering her. The other thing I was thinking about, as you were saying, you're talking about Lily Rose Depp's performance in that scene in particular, reminded me of Isabella Gianni's performance in Possession, that famous scene where she's in the like subway and she's flailing around.
Sure.
And of course, Isabella Gianni played this character in Werner Herzog's Nosferatu. And Possession is itself a movie about a woman who has this sort of like affair with a demon, basically. And it's all about like this disintegrating marriage because she's sort of has this she has this demonic sort of sexual relationship, which very similar to this movie in a way. And I think, that leads me to, so I was thinking a little bit, this is definitely not Thomas's movie. It's also not Orlok's movie. It's definitely Ellen's movie. But you can see it from Thomas's perspective. And when you do, it's sort of her in sort of encounters with this sort of demonic, otherworldly entity is, I think, a way to him is a representation, I think, of a kind of sexual anxiety, because, just imagine, like, you've got this wife who says things like this. I had this dream I married death, and I'd never been so happy as the moment when I held hands with death. And you're like, that's not a nice. I mean, you just got married to this guy, and now you're talking about like having this dream about being sort of with this demonic force. And I think it's also interesting that like when they're reunited, and she's sort of like, I think it's that scene you're describing, Phil, when she gets the possession, she's kind of flailing around. Thomas's reaction is to have sex with her. That's what he does.
Yeah.
He just immediately has sex with her.
Well, she also challenges him. She says, you can never like please me the way he could.
Exactly.
I
think it is this kind of like from his perspective, it is like a sexual anxiety. And then the way to overcome that is to
You mean like that he doesn't
her.
perform well enough?
Yeah,
or like,
yeah.
I see.
Like she's not satisfied by him. She needs a demon. And so he's like, all right, fuck you. I'm gonna have sex with you to possess you myself.
Right.
Again, the male possession of the female via the act of sex. And, I do think that is, I think the casting of Nicholas Hoult is really good in that regard.
He does screaming on the inside really well.
Screaming on the inside.
Well, he plays betas a lot. He gets cuckolded a lot.
Yeah.
It does feel like that happens. He's a great actor. I as you were talking, Justin, I was thinking about Eyes Wide Shut. I was thinking about the scene in the bedroom at the beginning where Nicole is talking to him about, basically sets the movie in motion and basically says like, I was ready to throw it all away for one night with this sailor. And obviously it sends Tom Cruise spiraling for, the remaining 2 hours and 20 minutes. But it has a similar sort of impotence to it, right? This idea of sort of, removing this masculinity, right? Like, and sort of, forcing a husband or a lover or what have you to sort of look within themselves as to their sexual weaknesses, perhaps. And yeah, I mean, I think that Thomas, I mean, he really is just kind of a eunuch in this movie. I don't get that impression from Jonathan Harker per se. In the film depictions of him, Jonathan feels a little bit more like a hero, whereas in this, Thomas does not feel heroic.
He doesn't do anything heroic. He gets back. He gets back to her, and then he kind of is like, and then he does. They try to kill Nosferatu, but they fail.
Yeah, and he's like, and he's the only one who thinks that's gonna work too. Like everybody's like, "That's right, sweetie. You go kill Dracula," and then right, and then Lily is winking at Willem Dafoe. She's like, "I got this." Just distract him for long enough.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like
sorry.
I do. One of the better performance moments in the film is the reaction that Nicholas Hoult gives to seeing Orlok for the first time. Just pure and utter horror and terror. I would argue, unfortunately, that the build-up to Orlok is better than when you actually get to see Orlok.
Yeah.
So, like, you have these sort of moments of longing and terror and all these things that are kind of all over the faces of this tremendous cast, and then he shows up and it's Dr. Robotnik. But I do think that it is very sort of indicative of Orlok not being a character and being a mirror to the people that are seeing him, as opposed to what he actually is himself.
That's a really good point,
which I do think is interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about like the opening, which gave me a bit of a jump in the film when she's lying, when Lily's lying on the ground, and then the hand reaches out and grabs her, and then it smashes to the title card. the movie doesn't have a lot of jump scares in it, really, or a lot of like, typical horror tropes. Again, it is sort of fascinating that the film is such a hit in considering, I don't know, fucking Gen Z and what they seem to gravitate towards. I would not have imagined that a sort of somewhat stuffy, monochromatic film would be so enticing to them. But I mean,
I totally agree. Well, I have a hypothesis about that, but before we get there, what did you think of Orlok's voice? Because that for me, that was my favorite part of him. I thought that was really, and he's got this really like heavy, I don't know if it's a Romanian accent, but whatever he's doing is great. And he's got that like breathing, the labored, like his lungs are full of fluid.
Yeah, a wet, heavy breathing.
But, I don't know. I thought that was creepier than the image.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, truth be told, Bill Skarsgård gets kind of lost in the I could not actually see him in the performance. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just like he's gone. Behind all the makeup and the breathing and what have you. So yeah, it's so weird that he's become like this guy.
Yeah, you put in makeup and make him evil.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's ever since Pennywise, I feel like he's just like that guy. It's just funny. I would not have pegged him as becoming this, but it's cool.
I mean, he has of the Skarsgårds, he has like a kind of more unusual looking face,
unsettling eyes, maybe, and that's why also like why he's effective in Barbarian. But like when he's not covered in makeup, he's also quite good.
Yeah,
love to see him try to get a duvet cover.
Laura, that was Laura's favorite part.
That's my favorite part of Barbarian is when he shows you how to put a duvet cover inside the duvet cover. I think about it all the time.
He's, it is so fascinating that like the Skarsgårds, of which, I mean, Stellan, Alex, and Bill, those seem to be is there a fourth that I'm forgetting?
I don't know.
Actually,
I'm sure there's more children.
I said it like as if there's like 12 of them.
I mean, there could be for all I know. They're so drastically different looking people, and like their vibes are so drastically different. It is really interesting that sort of the range that they have. I just finished a rewatch of Succession, and Alex Skarsgård is so sort of menacing, but also kind of useless, and just there's so much kind of packed into that performance. And then like I think about him in Long Shot, a great movie that I feel like people just don't watch nearly enough. The Charlize Theron. Seth Rogen movie where he plays the Canadian Prime Minister. Like it's so bizarre what they're all capable. Like Stellan can play obviously mustache twirling horrible villains, but also play like really caring, loving. It's pretty incredible.
Which of the Skarsgårds would you want to have dinner with? Of the three, are there more? Laura, can you just clarify?
Well, I'm finding other Skarsgårds, but at this point in time, I'm not comfortable saying that they're related because. Like there's Walter Skarsgård, who was in a 2018 movie. There's a Gustav Skarsgård, who's in Oppenheimer, apparently. But, I don't know how common the name is in Sweden. I don't want to make assumptions.
Let's go with the big three. So,
I think I'd say Stellan.
I think I'd be Stellan too.
I think Stellan's got, first of all, he's got like, obviously 30 some odd years in the biz on his kids. So he's just going to have good stories. He's just going to have a lot of people that he can tell you stories about. So that'd be mine. Yeah.
Laura, you found something?
Yeah, both Walter Skarsgård and Gustav are related.
There you go.
It's a dynasty.
Relatives. I've got Alexander, Sam Skarsgård, Bill Skarsgård, Aisha Skarsgård, Walter Skarsgård, and then there's two half siblings as well. It's a big family.
Wow.
Cool.
That sounds right. That sounds great.
Hollywood royalty.
Wow.
I think Bill Skarsgård. Yeah, it's true. It's like
I think they've got a beat though.
They've got them beat
by
they got them lapped.
But in terms of box office draw, I think the Hemsworth box office, like the amount of money they've made at the box office, got to be the Hemsworths, right?
Yeah, I mean, just Marvel alone.
Yeah,
I know Bill's made more movies, but like he's made a bunch of Lars von Trier movies.
You mean Alex has made a bunch of Alex? Yeah, Alex has. Bill is not in any Lars von Trier movies.
Stellan Skarsgård. Stellan has made a lot of Lars von Trier movies.
Sorry, not Bill.
He's made, and also Alex was in Melancholia.
Yes, Melancholia. Yes. Sorry.
So
Wow.
I get them all mixed up in my head.
yeah.
Okay, but back to the movie
Yes,
of the
the
day,
movie.
Nosferatu. So there were, I kind of liked it when the movie kind of, for me, like got fun when Thomas first gets to the Romanian village and has that dream in quotes here, because he wakes up with mud on his shoes, so suggesting maybe it wasn't a dream where they kill the vampire, they have a virginal sacrifice and all that. And then he first gets to Orlok's castle. I really liked that stuff. I thought it was like, it was very, I feel like that's where the digital cinematography really worked for me, because he has these, like the way he shot it, it's like, and I guess they did this for all the scenes, but it was very prominent there, like a lot of smoke. So everything's really hazy and you can't really see anything. And he's walking down this empty path, surrounded by trees. And it just feels like he's in a dream. And you're like, wow, I guess he's still in a dream. No, this is really happening. And I think that kind of, like you're in a waking dream almost, that I felt like that was really effective and really nice filmmaking by Eggers.
Yeah. I mean, so on set, whenever you're adding smoke, they call it atmosphere. And I feel like that's probably the best description of this movie as a whole, of this atmosphere.
Atmosphere.
And I think that's, I do think that's really apt. It just feels like the movie is sort of trying to kind of lull you into a false sense of security and sort of pull you into its haze and its dreamlike kind of quality. And I agree with you, Justin, that like that stuff worked really well. I think it worked well. It's probably when the film is at its most expansive as well. Like it is. I know that this movie had a relatively limited budget, all things considered. I'm just going to look up what it was, because I don't want to speak out of school, but
it
I do
was
feel
mostly
like
smoke machines.
it's mostly atmosphere.
I mean,
it's a $50 million budget, which is not nothing, obviously.
Yeah, that's a lot.
15?
50.
Oh, 50.
50.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one half of Oppenheimer.
One half of Oppenheimer.
Yeah. It's not nothing by any means.
1/4 of Tenet.
Sure.
That's how we do it in terms of
Nolan movies.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I think A24, which obviously is spending more money now and is trying to sort of get more return on their investments. I think that Eggers has proved himself. Obviously, this isn't an A24. This is a Focus movie, so I take it back. Focus, which did they did Northman as well. So like, I think that, which, as you might recall, did not do well in theaters, kind of flopped in theaters, and then made a staggering amount of money online. One of the first sort of post-COVID movies to do really, really well VOD, or PVOD and then VOD. So so much so that Focus got back in business with him and obviously gave him more money, and this has proved to be a smart endeavor for them. But yeah, it's this is a long way of saying that, like, it's a relatively claustrophobic movie. It's relatively small. It feels like it's always kind of surrounding you, like the walls are closing in. So that part of the film up top, I felt like, to your point, Justin, felt very sort of expansive, and you started to feel like you're going on a journey and you're being sort of taken somewhere.
I really liked when he first walks into that small village. Everybody, and it's starting, like the nightmare-ish of it is already starting. There's that they all laugh at him for no reason in the very beginning, but also when he walks in, the atmosphere of, like, I was like, oh yeah, like they've got roaring fires and everybody's smoking. Like the air quality must have been insane.
Not great.
But also, like, Nicholas Hoult, it feels like he's 6'9" in this movie, because Eggers must have been like, back in 1830, all the ceilings were 5 feet, so that's what we're gonna do. So Nick is like, he's like
hunched
ducking
over
every single crossbeam of that inn. And it made me, it really, like, it, that kind of like got into my bones a little bit, that scene of him just walking through a strange village where he doesn't speak the language and people are blessing him and freaking out and he does not know what's going on.
Right.
I think it also, you bringing that up, Laura, made me think about Burton's Sleepy Hollow as well.
Yes.
First and foremost, sort of the practicality, the tactility of everything, it all feeling very lived in and very, I mean, despite the fact that Sleepy Hollow was, I think, 95% on sound stages. It felt like a small town. It felt like all of that. I think about, Ichabod walking into the town had a similar kind of vibe to what we're talking about here with Thomas. But I also just feel like, Eggers does seem like he is not a colorful filmmaker. None of his films are particularly colorful. And that's not a knock against him. That's his choice. That's his palette. That's what he likes to play in. And more power to him. But I do agree with you that the sort of the punch of colors that you get in the Coppola movie, the infamous suit of armor that Dracula is wearing when he walks in, that red sort of ribbed, I don't know how else to explain it, kind of costume is incredible. Yeah, it is tough for us. I understand why we are comparing it to that film. But like Bram Stoker's Dracula is such a great movie. Obviously, it won Best Costumes. Like it does feel as though, I'm curious to see this year at the Oscars how Nosferatu. I think Nosferatu is going to get a fair amount of below the line nominations. I'd be surprised if it doesn't. I think it's one of the, from a production perspective, one of the best executed films on the cinematography and art direction and costumes and all that sort of stuff. It's just top notch. And as I mentioned up top, it's the thing that stayed with me the most, and the reason that if I was to watch it again, it would be to sort of just spend more time in this world that he's created, less story wise. But I'm curious to see how it does at the Oscars in terms of that sort of stuff.
It'll be interesting to see. Yeah. Well, do you have something?
Well, I think what sets this movie apart too, like for me, in the inevitable comparison with Bram Stoker's Dracula, just because this is like in our mind all the time, is the emotion of the performances. We all, in this house, we love Keanu, but Keanu is, a little bit more wooden as a Jonathan. The horror of Dracula, or the sexiness of Dracula is not necessarily coming through the performance of Keanu, or even through Winona, I think, who I like very much, but it's more in like the wild, crazy creativity of the filmmaking. I feel like it's more like Coppola's vision and the way it's realized. I think that gets that across. Whereas, I think the emotion of like, facing Orlok for the first time, or being under one of these like raptures that Ellen has, it's so focused on the individual performances of this movie. So I don't know if what that mean for nominations or not, but
the other thing to compare it to Coppola's film is that Coppola's film, as you said earlier, Laura, is very funny. And I was thinking, this film is actually pretty funny, though. Okay, so I have a couple examples to throw to you guys. Okay. So
I was laughing. Laura was
laughing, but Laura was the only person laughing in the theater.
Will you remind me what I laughed at?
I got a couple examples.
Holt?
I got a couple examples. Okay, so here's one. So they've got the character of Knock, who is the Renfield character.
Yeah.
Okay. Knock is the one who sort of sets this all in motion and then goes crazy, and he's eventually captured and institutionalized. And Dr. Sievers, the guy who's the kind of who's got the really heavy, gravelly voice that's in all the Eggers films, he goes to see him, and Knock is he eats the head off of a pigeon.
Yeah.
And Dr. Sievers says, "Now, why would you do that?"
My good man.
It's a fantastic reaction. And it's just, I was like, yeah, that is funny. That's a good line. Anyway, so I do think there are moments of levity. I'll give you one more. So another one is this is again, kind of almost like character introductions, almost, because this is, you've seen Knock, but you almost haven't, right? Because you're like, oh, that's the same guy. Laura had to point out that it was the same guy as the guy who sent Thomas on his thing. I was like,
well, the transition is very fast with him being clothed and laughing about Providence a lot, but mostly functional, and then naked on the floor.
Exactly. I was like, okay. I was like, that's just Renfield. No, okay. Okay. The second one is when you first meet von Franz. So they go to von Franz's house. This is Willem Dafoe's character, and Sievers gives him a big hug and pats him on the back.
Oh,
and
it's the
so
dust.
much dust flies off of him. Like this dude hasn't moved in like 10 days. He's just dusty.
I do think that
That
like
was funny.
I mean, the Lighthouse was pretty funny. You know,
Yeah, the Lighthouse is
I
funny.
think that Eggers has a darkly comedic sensibility for sure.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think the Northman could have stood to have a little bit more of that. It was a little bit. It wasn't really a laugh riot. But yeah. I mean, I think that he's. Yeah. I mean, I think that for whatever reason, and maybe this is unfair, David Lowery and Robert Eggers blend in my brain. For whatever reason.
Me too.
Yeah. Justin was like,
me
remember
too.
when he made that movie Green Knight? I was like, that wasn't him.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm totally with you,
There's
Phil.
something
Yeah.
about those two guys that blend together. I think they also look somewhat similar. I don't know if you ever looked at pictures of them, but they both are like bearded, hair thinning white guys.
Yeah.
They just both
About
have
our age.
about our age. Like
Yeah.
they both kind of have a similar vibe. And their movies have sort of similar vibes. Although Lowry, I would say, has got a bigger range.
I agree.
But yeah, it's funny when Laura, when you were talking about Keanu, I was thinking about how I think it's so funny that in '92 he was the big knock on that movie.
Yeah.
Like he was literally like the bullseye that they just kept fucking banging away at him, being like, fucking Keanu and his
Can't do an
LA
accent.
surfer, can't do an accent, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think first of all, I think he's great in it. Like I actually do understand people thinking that Coppola was forced into casting him because he was an up and coming, young, attractive, guy, the equivalent of if Eggers, had cast Harry Styles, for instance, right? Like if that sort of like, how do we get teenage girls to come see this movie? Let's cast whatever. But I actually think that Keanu really works as Jonathan in that movie. Like, I think he actually brings a really interesting energy to it. Yes, he's stiff, but I don't know. I think it's choice. I don't think it's like, I think it's, I don't know. I like it.
I agree with that. I mean, because watching the Murnau, is that how you say Murnau? Murnau. Good Lord. Murnau Nosferatu, like the Thomas character / the Jonathan character is a ding dong.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like,
Yeah. He periodically goes to read a book that has been given to him, called Vampires Look Out.
This guy will eat you. And he's just like,
and he laughs at it and throws it on the ground.
It's great.
He's just like waving to his life. He's like, goodbye. Like, he's just like, everything's cool. No, he's such a ding dong. And I think, this is a character that's going to be cuckolded either way you choose, by a corpse or by a super sexy corpse. A gross corpse, super sexy corpse. Either way, he gets cuckolded. And so, this character is supposed to be, he's not supposed to be maybe the smartest tool in the shed or the sexiest or the most adventurous or the bravest. I think Keanu does it well. I think Nicholas Hoult did it well too.
He's an avatar for the audience is the thing, right? Like he is.
Yes.
And audience surrogates tend not to be the most dynamic, right? Like they just kind of have, they have a purpose to serve for the narrative and in order for the audience to be able to know what's going on. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
In the case of Coppola's film, though,
everybody's just going, whoa,
Artifice,
when they watch it.
I think with Coppola, though, artifice is key to in that film in particular, but a lot of his films, in late period films in particular. But that film, that film is entirely shot on sound stages, and that film is embracing the artifice, using all these old techniques, rear projection, all kinds of reversing the film and everything. And you can kind of see that artifice, but it doesn't matter. And so that's why I think having Keanu in there, it's sort of fine. Because you don't need, this
you don't need to believe it's 1830.
Yeah, you don't need to believe it's
obviously not.
It's some fantastical world or whatever. And this film is like, no, this is 1838. Yeah. We are in, this is we walked into the Romanian folklore and we're going to live in it. And there's going to be dirt and mud and it's going to be gross. And actually to that extent, I was telling Laura coming out of it, I was like, my only thing is that I forget who said this first, but I heard it probably on some podcast. It may have been on your show, but I don't remember. But there was someone who said some people have iPhone face. Yes. That's where they look like they've seen an iPhone. And my only concern is that kind of everyone except for Defoe and the Sievers, the guy who plays Dr. Sievers, kind of feel like they have iPhone face. I'm like, they all look too modern to me. And I feel like that kind of takes it out of this all period accuracy. Whereas with Coppola, I have no complaint because I'm just like, well, he's not trying to be accurate in any sense. It's just kind of being some weird like alternate universe.
I would agree on the iPhone face of it all. It's tough. It's just tough, right? Like young actors are going to feel modern in a lot of ways.
I know.
But I do think that Emma Corrin works really. She doesn't have
That's true.
that
She kind of looks like
she feels very kind of timeless in so many ways.
Yeah.
I think she's a great actor. This role doesn't give her a ton to do, but I find her. She's got sort of this, and I wonder if. I mean, I know that she's, and forgive me, it's they. I keep saying she.
Okay.
They are gender non-binary, which I think is interesting as well. There is a kind of Tilda Swinton-ness to Emma Corrin of this sort of feeling like beyond gender, like somehow is existing on some other plane of existence. Which I think might also speak to why she doesn't feel. They don't feel.
I like
technologically, But
I totally agree. Okay, so let's do a podcast like it's thing. Let's rate the movie. You guys do a rating from 1 to 99, right?
Okay.
On your show because the show is actually Phil. Why don't you tell us a bit about Podcast Like It's? And you guys are doing the 2000s right now. It was originally Podcast Like It's 1999, but now you're doing a whole decade.
Yeah, so it started as 1999. We then did 1992 for a little bit. Emily and I did that for about a year, and then we just wanted to kind of give ourselves a bigger net and a bigger sort of swath, and also be able to do miniseries. So what we've been doing now is miniseries baked underneath the aughts, the decade of the 2000s. Thus far, we've done the top 10 box office. We've done the 2000 Best Picture nominees. We're currently doing Tom Cruise. You guys were on to talk Vanilla Sky, which was a great episode that people should absolutely check out.
Check it out.
And we're doing Tom Cruise right now. I don't know when this episode drops. When does this episode?
This episode's going to drop very soon,
like tomorrow.
No, it's going to drop in a week and a half. I think.
We don't have the same sort of runway you've got, Phil.
No.
We recorded for the listeners. We recorded our Vanilla Sky episode like 6 months,
like 6 years ago.
We really try to bank episodes because Emily's got a toddler.
Life.
You guys have a kid. You know how it goes. We're doing Tom Cruise right now. February, as a spoiler for an upcoming miniseries, we're doing for Vanilla. Jesus Christ! For Valentine's Day, we're doing Nicholas Sparks. So we're doing 3 Nicholas Sparks films from the 2000s.
Is that why Emily was watching Walk to Remember?
That is why she was Walk to Remember. The Notebook and Nights in Rodanthe. We'll be doing those in February, and then we'll be wrapping up our Tom Cruise miniseries on the other side of that. So that'll take us to April. And I will not announce what we're doing in April, but it's fun.
Okay. Well, it's a great show. People should check it out. I also will, obviously you should check out the Vanilla Sky episode because we're on it. It's awesome. Yeah. But the Passion of the Christ episode was awesome. I really enjoyed that episode. That was a great discussion. It made me, honestly, I was like, first of all, you were talking about like and apparently now he's gonna shoot the sequel.
He is.
And you're talking about that, and I was like, man, I cannot wait to rewatch The Passion of the Christ. And Laura's sitting there shaking her head; she never wants to see it. I'm gonna force you to watch it.
It's a tough hang. It's not a great fun movie to watch. I'll never watch it again.
Read the book. No,
not even to get ready for Passion 2.
I
You're
think
like,
I know
I
what
already
happens.
know the story.
It ends on a cliffhanger, but I
with the
think
story.
we know what happens. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. And then just very quickly on our Patreon, I do podcasts like it's the 1990s, where I do miniseries based on the films of the 1990s. Currently, also doing some Tom Cruise stuff, and then after Tom Cruise, I will be doing Renee Zellweger's rom-coms of the 90s. So that would include Jerry Maguire and Bridget Jones's Diary and Down with Love. So there you go.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah. So check it out. Okay. So now let's do the rating.
Okay.
And so it's a 1 to 99,
This is a
99
very
being the
broad
best,
palette.
1 being the worst.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, of course,
hard.
with the caveat that, of course, we all just saw this movie. We've all only seen it once. We've all just seen it recently. It's not like we are, these are not our settled judgments. They may change in the future. We may see it again and change our minds. But with that in mind, I want you all to pick a single number between 1 and 99. Phil, do you want to start, or should I start?
Yeah, I can
with
go
Laura?
first. I mean, I think that, I gave this 4 stars on Letterboxd out of 5.
Okay.
So I think that I'm probably
on the top half.
Yeah, let's say low 80s is probably where I'm at on it. I'd say I'm going to say 80 on the nose. I don't
That's
know that.
great.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's high. That's high. I actually think that, given our discussion, that's higher than I expected it to be.
Yeah, I think that I really only have like a positive association with it for the most part. You know what I mean? Like, I think that when I was in the theater, I was enjoying it. I'm thrilled that I got to see it on a big screen. Like, it looks so great on a big screen. Everyone should be seeing it that way if they can. So I just think that like it was, I'm always going to embrace filmmaking with a capital F when you're getting to see somebody making something big and exciting in that way. So yeah.
Laura, do you concur, or are you a little higher, a little lower?
I was originally going to say 70. Now I feel bad.
No, I mean, you shouldn't. 70 is
70's not so bad, right?
What is that on a 5-star rating? Is that like 3.5?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm going to give it a 70. I just think it didn't keep my attention the whole way through the way I wanted it to. And I think if I were to pick up a Dracula story, it might not be this one of my first choice if I was going to pick up a book or a movie or something. Like, it's just not my favorite retelling of this story, I think, but I certainly enjoyed myself.
70, 80. I think I'm going to go be slightly contrarian and go a little lower, but not because I don't like this movie. I mean, if 50 is 2.5 stars, which I feel like is perfectly fine, then I'm a little higher than that. So I'm going to say 60 and say that, I think this is a perfectly fine movie. I'm like you, Phil, I'm not the biggest Robert Eggers fan, although I can appreciate, I appreciate what he's doing, and I appreciate his kind of scholarly views about all this. Like in all these interviews, he's always talking about the research he does. And I think that's great. It's more of just what I vibe with. And I think I just vibe with stuff that's, even if it's scholarly in its own way, I want it to be weirder and more sort of silly and more, sort of filmic, and I don't know how to put that. But anyway, yeah, so that's my view. But I think perfectly fine. I quite enjoyed it. And
what's your favorite Eggers?
My favorite Eggers is The Witch. Phil, what's your favorite Eggers?
It might be this. I mean, I don't know. He's like, as I said up top, like he's not my guy. Like, I respect it and I enjoy it, and it's not like I dislike any of his films. It's just tough for me to ride for them. Like, I remember seeing The Witch after everyone was talking about how it was like the scariest movie ever, and I was just like, this is not that scary. Like, I mean, Philip's scary. That goat seems fucked up, but like, I don't know that like the movie as a whole was all that scary. And it's a lot of kind of build up to a really kind of great last sequence. Like, it does end in a great place. Like, and as they say, leave them in a good place, right? Like, if your movie ends great and people are leaving the theater feeling, then that's the right way to leave a theater, right? So, I as I said, I want to give The Northman another shot, because I'm thinking maybe I was a little too hard on it, and I think that maybe at that time I just really wanted it to be better than it was. But I did. I think that I'm excited to see what he gets to keep doing, and I think that this movie, the success of this film, means he's going to get to take a even bigger swing next time.
Yeah.
What that looks like, I don't know. And that's exciting.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Yeah.
Laura, what is your favorite Eggers?
I think it's the lighthouse.
Yeah.
Which is weird because I didn't think it would like two dudes
But it
like
is the
making fart
funniest.
jokes.
It's the funniest of
Like
his
is that it is
So,
the funniest. I just think it's
yeah.
like the most wackadoo
It is.
of all of them. And
This could
I
stand to
like
be more
the-
wackadoo.
I
Yeah.
think it could.
Although, let me give you one more moment of levity from the film.
One more time, Laura laughed out loud in a dead silent theater.
Yeah. So this is the sequence where von Franz is brought to Ellen for the first time, and he's like, "Oh my God, like she's not here. She's possessed by a demon." And he's like, "Let me show you." And he says, "Do not protest. She is not here." And he takes a giant needle and he stabs it through her arm. And then Friedrich says, "I do protest." I do protest.
I think Aaron Taylor Johnson is really funny in the background of all this movie.
Yeah.
He's just so exasperated.
Yeah.
And I think he's really, and then I think I really feel for him at the very end when he crawls in with his wife in her coffin. But I think he's great as like a tertiary character.
Yeah.
But his general exasperation at everybody acting insane around him is pretty funny.
He's another guy that I'm like, not the I don't love him. Like I don't. I think he's good in Tenet, where he's
so good in Tenet.
He's basically unintelligible. You don't understand anything he's saying or doing, but it works.
Cowboy shit.
Yeah, he's another guy where I'm just like, be weirder. He's a weird guy, but because he has these kind of good looks.
Nocturnal Animals, he's really weird.
Is that the one where he's he's on the toilet?
He's on the outdoor toilet?
Yeah.
Correct.
I hate that
I think
movie,
so.
though.
Yeah, I do too. I find
What about Savages? Isn't he in Savages?
he's in Savages.
Another movie that
as
doesn't
well.
exist.
Yeah. I don't know. I like
Kick-Ass?
Justin always calls him Vronsky because I do think
Vronsky.
that mustache and the moment of insane sexual
He's
tension
good in
she
that.
has with the mustache.
He's good in that.
Yeah.
Speaking of mustaches, another bushy mustache. Yeah. I mean, he's just a guy to me that feels like he's more interesting than we're letting him be. And he's always kind of he's forgettable, obviously, in Avengers. He's whatever. He's fine in it.
They just got rid of his character, right?
Yeah,
They're like,
he's
anyway,
Quicksilver,
Scarlet Witch has a brother.
He's
don't even know about that
the
anymore.
token death in that movie that we're supposed to be sort of feel bad about. But then he's in Godzilla, the Gareth Edwards Godzilla.
Yeah, sure is.
Which again is pretty forgettable. I don't know. He's just a guy that the reason I think that Tennant and to some degree Anna Karenina stand out is because he's allowed to kind of be weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this,
let Ate be weird.
Yeah.
Let him be. Let him be weird. Yeah.
Let him be weird. I also just love that in that scene in Tenet where he's explaining the pincer movement, his marker doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why I find that so funny.
Laura's like, get a better marker.
Get a better marker. It's a choice. He didn't have a good marker, but it's
Nolan was like, his marker needs to not really work.
Yeah, it's like you need to not understand a single word. You need to not understand this plot. And if a visual would help, too bad. This marker's out of ink.
Yeah. Any other stupid questions?
Any other stupid questions?
It's so funny. Tenet is a movie that I did not see when it came out.
Sure.
Until it was put digitally, because unlike my roommate, I didn't want to risk my life to see it.
Yeah. Us too.
And then I watched it when it came out digitally, and I was just like, what? It just didn't work for me. Yeah. And then the re-release last year, when it came out in IMAX, I went to see that, and I was just like, oh, now I'm fully Tenet pilled. I
love it.
I think once I realized to not try to understand it,
exactly,
it's a vibe.
The scientist told you, don't try to understand it.
It's
she
true.
says it in the top.
Which is kind of also, as much as I agree with it and I'm now willing to go with it, it's a little bit of an annoying thing for a director to be like, don't really pay attention to this colossal expensive thing that I'm doing.
I know. But Phil, here, I will say this though, Phil. Yes. It does make sense if you diagram it. So it's like
Justin
it actually does make sense, but
I'm sure
you don't need to do that to have fun. That's what he's saying. It's not like he's saying don't try to understand it because it doesn't make sense. He's basically just saying, don't try to understand it because
I'm smarter than you,
yeah,
and I got this.
It is crazy how complicated it is. Like it truly is. The sequence where they're doing the basically that middle sequence
where
they're
the
doing
thing's
car
spinning
chase,
around when they're
and it
in the
goes back and
room.
forth.
Yeah.
That sequence, like people have made like multiple explainer videos on YouTube that are incredibly complicated.
Yeah, that you've watched.
I've watched totally because unpacking. It's really, it's like remarkable. But what's really remarkable about it is that, of course, we're talking about Tenet in a Nosferatu episode, but Christopher Nolan had this all in his head. He could just hold it in his mind, all of this, and he wrote it down on the page. But he had it in his head. That's the thing that, like, I think he just. I don't know. I just think he truly is a genius. Like he can do that kind of thing.
I think he's great. I obviously love his films. I really do.
We forced you to say that on this podcast.
We have a gun to Phil's head.
Have like
you must.
And
love
you guys
Nolan.
need to obviously come on to talk about a Nolan film on our 2000s at some point. But like,
yes, please, anything.
Oh my God, Justin,
seriously,
simmer down.
Anything,
simmer down.
But I do think that. There's sometimes the feeling that it's kind of a lot of bullshit too. Like there's kind of like,
sure.
like why is it called Tenet?
Yeah.
Oh, because it needs to, because it's a palindrome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool,
but
Phil.
like,
totally. No, there's a bunch of stupid kind of things like that too. Well, actually the other reason it's called Tenet is because do you know the Tenet Square?
No.
So this.
My God.
Yeah. Do you know about this? This is something that was discovered in Mount Vesuvius, and they talk about that in the film, where all of the character, and he drew all the character names from it. It's a square of TENT in the middle, and then all of the other characters like Sator, SATOR, Rotas is in there. All of those words are in there in this like palindromic square. And it was found in this like ancient ruins, like
which is presumably why they go to Pompeii.
Yeah, which is why they go to Pompeii.
Yeah.
And like, anyway, but like, so, okay, fine.
But no,
there's
that's just
all
a cool thing that he found.
Yeah,
and
there's
he's
all
like, I'm
that
going to make
silly
this
stuff
happen.
that's there. But that's the kind of thing where I'm like, okay, fine. That's like, you can play that game of like Easter egg, that movie, but like, it's more than that. You know what I mean? Like there is that part, and Nolan does that, and he kind of encourages that.
Sure.
But
and listen, I think that it's not a coincidence that this guy has the following that he has, and that people are as excited about his films as they are. I can't wait to see what the Odyssey entails.
Oh my God.
Okay,
Phil, I cannot.
Before Justin passes out, can I say one more thing that I liked about Nosferatu?
Okay,
yes,
sorry, Phil. We cannot keep talking about Nolan because seriously, I will like go crazy. I'll like bust out my copy of the Nolan Variations.
Oh my
It's on the
God.
shelf here somewhere.
I like the blood stuff in this movie.
The sucking?
Specifically what I mean is that the sucking is like a full body
It's true.
experience,
Yeah.
and like the like heaving, and like it looks like a lot of work, and it really makes you think about how much liquid is in your body.
It looks like a lot of work. We're mostly
gnarly.
water, Laura. I don't know if you know this, but
Yeah.
we're mostly liquid. So
it looks like he's like, I gotta settle in for like 6 hours.
this is
here,
gonna
'cause
take
this is
a
like
beat,
lot
but
of work. This is my core exercise of the day.
Ugh.
And there's just like a lot of sounds. Sorry.
There's a lot of good sound effects in this movie. Maybe it'll get a sound nomination.
Yeah, I think the Foley.
I'm
is
curious
awesome
to
in
see
this
what
movie.
other, Justin, when you reached out to me, you were like, what sort of Oscar possible, what have you? I mean, I think, like I said, I think a lot of below the line. I don't see performances getting any nominations. But yeah, I mean, it's turned into a weird year at the Oscars. So we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out.
It's going to be very hard to predict what's going to happen, and that's going to be fun.
Yeah, for the first time, considering last year being such a lock, like it almost being boring, it'll be nice to watch this year. I mean, I genuinely unclear as to what sort of stuff is going to win. It could be Brutalist. It could be any number of things.
Have you seen The Brutalist yet?
I have seen The Brutalist.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm excited. We have not.
Are
seen
you guys?
it, so.
No, we haven't.
You got to go see that in the theater. You got to see the 70mm with an intermission.
I'm not gonna, Justin's,
3.5 hours. I don't know if I can actually make Laura do that.
No, he asked me when I was really grumpy one morning. I think I had a bad night of sleep, and he's like, "Do you want to go see this 4-hour movie in 70? And we have to get like a babysitter." And I was just like, "Architecture's stupid." And he's like, "Okay."
I will say, in the Brutalist defense, and I have my issues with it, so like I don't think it's the masterpiece that everyone Emily in particular thinks it is. I mean, I do.
Emily loves it.
It was in my top 10 this year. I think it's a great movie. It does not feel like 3.5 hours, Laura. Like it flies by. I'm not just saying that to try to coerce you into a theater to see it, but I do think that like it is. I have sat through 90-minute movies that feel like for fucking ever, right? Like where you're just like this. So I unfortunately think so many of us, when you hear a running time like that, it gets in your head. And I promise you this movie flies by. It does not feel long at all. And the intermission is helpful in that regard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, babysitters and such, I imagine that's a pain in the ass. So,
that's the only challenge. Phil, thank you so much for being here. And again, for the folks at home, the show is Podcast Like It's. What are the socials? Can you give people so they can find the show?
You can check us out on, we're everywhere. We're on Instagram at Podcast Like It's and Twitter and TikTok. I'm at PM Iscove, Blue Sky as well. And people can follow me there. And they can check out our Patreon at www.patreon.com/podcastlikeits. And that's where they can listen to myself and Emily wax, poetic about films.
Check it out. It's a really fun podcast. I'm a regular listener of the show. I think it's really great. Yeah, thanks, Phil. And we're at CowsPod on Twitter. Or at cowspod.com. On Blue Sky and also on Instagram at CowsPod. And you can find us on the web at cowspod.com. And in 2 weeks, we'll be doing Nickel Boys with Bill Gabiri. So tune in for that. That'll be our other Oscar. Even though it's probably not going to get any Oscars, but who cares, right? It's
our Oscar.
It's going to get nominated, I think, for a handful.
Okay.
I hope.
Okay.
We just had Bill on for The Last Samurai. So that's coming up in a couple weeks. So yeah, he's the best.
More Tom Cruise.
Yep. But that movie, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was a blind spot for me on the Tom Cruise.
I think that's what Emily said too. But maybe we were just talking about watching modern movies versus watching 90s movies, where we or 2000s movies, where we go back and we're just like masterpiece. It was
that happens a lot, right? Where we're just like, we didn't know how good we had it with The Last Samurai. And you're like, I mean, okay. So,
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.